All right, I think everyone's kind of getting loaded in there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Woods. I'm the Managing Director for Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park, and I'm also this evening's director for the show tonight. We have some feedback somewhere. I'm not sure how to, I think that's gone away now, maybe. Is that better? Okay, good. Good evening, and if you'd like, when we are right now, when we're just sort of discussing things, if everyone would like to turn their cameras on, we'd love to see your smiling faces. If you choose not to, and you just want to observe, that's okay too. We would ask that when we go into reading the scenes, for the sake of people being able to kind of focus on the actors, if you just shut your camera off real quick. And then if you have ambient noise, it might help if you turn your microphone off unless you want to speak. That would be helpful as well. So the format of the evening, and as we go through, we'll probably have more people joining us, but we've got a nice big crowd tonight, so thank you and welcome. But the format is basically that we're going to study Richard II. And if for those of you who have been familiar with the Bard's Book Club that we've done in the past, it's basically an effort to examine a play in detail, sort of a dramaturgical approach. We have our dramaturg here tonight. Hailey, raise your hand. There's Hailey, Stephan, our dramaturg. And we have, as a special bonus tonight, the Bard's Book Club with a flair, we have actors tonight. So actors, all give a wave. Give a wave if you're an actor, please. There's all my actors. There they are. So these are all OSP alums. They've all acted with OSP before. They're all going to be acting with OSP in the future. We're actually, Andie was set to, Andie Fuentes there. She was going to be in As You Like It, and that got canceled for COVID. So she was just on the cusp of working with us there on that one. But Erin Sloan is in Chicago. So she's joining us from the Windy City. I know Jonathan McClure, Shane is here in Oklahoma City. Nick, I think you're in Norman right now, aren't you? Okay, and Andie, where are you? Are you in Norman?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I'm in Oklahoma City. So we have a lot to cover tonight. We're very excited about getting started. And like I said, the format is really going to be that we're going to work through this. I've selected a series of scenes through the play. And as we go through, I will help prompt us through the scenes, and then Hailey will help with the discussion. She'll kind of help manage some of the discussion aspects, but we really want participation. That's the way that this works best. So as we read a scene, we'll then stop after each one and have a chance to discuss the major themes within that scene. Some of them are longer than others, some of them are shorter than others. But I think the best way to explain this format, which is brand new to us as well, is just to kind of dive in and start doing it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and get started. So Richard II, if you would like, Hailey, can you give us just a really quick overview of the play itself, just so if those of you who haven't really read it or aren't quite familiar with it, give us like a 2-minute synopsis of Richard II.
Yeah, sure. So Richard II is about Richard II, no, and he, at this point in his political life, has become unpopular because he is spending lots of money, and then there, at the very beginning of the play, there is a conflict between Mowbray and Bolingbroke, and they're accusing each other of conspiracy, and they end up both getting banished. And Bolingbroke is he's a lord over in England, and his father is passes away, and he is supposed to inherit his father's land and his title, but he is banished. So he comes back to England while King Richard is away, and everyone sees this as him betraying the king and having treason. So they end up. So Richard comes back, and he ends up giving his crown up to Henry, and he becomes Bolingbroke, and Henry becomes King Henry IV. And it's about the abdication of Richard II's crown and all that entails.
Very good. I couldn't have done it better myself. I think that was about 90 seconds. Shakespeare in 90 seconds. There you are. Good night, folks. Just kidding. All right, so let's get started. First scene we're going to look at, as Hailey mentioned, is a bit of the feud between Mowbray and Bolingbroke. This is just, this will be Andie Fuentes reading Mowbray for us, and this is after actually King Richard asks Mowbray to let it go, to forgive and forget, to not hold a grudge, to don't go to battle. And what is Mowbray respond, Andie?
Am I good to just get into it?
Good, go for it, yeah.
Okay, perfect. My life thou shalt command, but not my shame. The one my duty owes, but my fair name. Despite of death that lives upon my grave, to dark dishonor's use thou shalt not have. I am disgraced, impeached, and baffled here, pierced to the soul with slander's venom spear, the which no balm can cure but his heart blood, which breatheth this poison.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, my quick take on that is just, you know, what is going on with, and this is where we open the discussion to all of you lovely people, the weight of reputation and what that means, personal shame and reputation, not letting a grudge go, absolutely not, because you've been insulted. So what are some initial thoughts on that? Anyone? We've got some questions to help spur discussion if no one wants to be the brave one and speak up.
Well, the insults are pretty intense. It's hard to forgive the insults that they take time to make. Pale, trembling coward is how Bolingbroke starts, and it goes on from there. This has some of the best insults and extended challenges and insults in Shakespeare, I think, that I've read.
Anyone else? Hailey, what's your question for this one?
So my question for this one is, why do we as human beings hold such significance in our own personal reputation? You know, why do we care so much about what other people think about us?
It's everything. Reputation is everything.
Right.
At the end of the day, that's all you have.
Right. It lives on.
During
Yeah, it lives on beyond you. It's your legacy. It's what you leave behind. So there's a lot of talk about reputation in this play. There's a lot of talk about, you know, there's a lot of things done in this play that are based on reputation, holding on to your reputation, giving the look of good reputation even when it's bad, meaning sort of a glazing over of the bad stuff, especially on Richard's part. But a lot of people talk themselves into and out of reputation and vengeance and revenge for having that reputation destroyed or in any way tarnished. So let's actually just move on to the next moment that I've picked out. This is a moment just a little bit after this scene when the Duchess of Gloucester is going to confront her brother-in-law. So really quickly, Richard's uncle, John of Gaunt, is still alive, and he's around, but his brother Gloucester has been killed. And this is a scene between the Duchess, his widow, and John of Gaunt. And in this scene, really it's just a speech I've picked out, but she is exhorting her husband to take vengeance for what's happened. So go ahead, Erin.
Finds brotherhood in thee no sharper spur? Hath love in thy old blood no living fire? Edward's 7 sons, whereof thyself art one, whereas 7 vials of his sacred blood, or 7 fair branches springing from one root. Some of those 7 are dried by nature's course, some of those branches by the destinies cut. But Thomas, my dear lord, my life, my Gloucester, one vial full of Edward's sacred blood, one flourishing branch of his most royal root is cracked, and all the precious liquor spilt, is hacked down, and his summer leaves all faded, by envy's hand and murder's bloody axe. Ah, Gaunt, his blood was thine. That bed, that womb, that metal, that self-mold that fashioned thee, made him a man. And though thou liv'st and breath'st, yet art thou slain in him. Thou dost consent in some large measure to thy father's death, in that thou seest thy wretched brother die, who was the model of thy father's life. Call it not patience, Gaunt. It is despair. In suffering thus thy brother to be slaughtered, thou show'st the naked pathway to thy life, teaching stern murder how to butcher thee, which in mean men we entitle patience, is pale, cold cowardice in noble breasts. What shall I say? To safeguard thine own life, the best way is to venge my Gloucester's death.
Very nice. Very nice read. What's happening here? What are some thoughts and reactions on this speech? Hailey?
She's definitely a woman in pain,
Yeah.
to say the least. And I think this also, begs the question of, why do we feel justified with revenge, or a lot of times, why do we feel like there's no other option to do it? And what duty do we have to our family?
Yeah, again, there's a legacy question here, and also almost a nobility question. That which in mean men we entitle patience is pale, cold cowardice in noble breasts. This noblesse oblige for revenge, this, if I can twist that sort of idea a little bit, but it's this idea that, with great power comes great responsibility. I mean, it's this idea that if you are of a certain rank or bloodline or whatnot, that you have to take action. You have to have revenge if someone wrongs you, versus if you're a mean man, meaning a lower class or poor, whatever, then it's better if you're meek and you have patience. So vengeance is rewarded if you're powerful already, and it's looked down upon if you are meek to begin with. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy. Any thoughts on that from our guests or actors or anybody?
I think she wends her way through the speech in terms of, she plays to the family legacy. She plays to that, the meanness, the baseness, we're better than that. We get to do the other things. But then in the end, she plays the fear card, and listen, if you don't, you have to do this in order to save your own life, because if it can happen to him, it can happen to you, York. So, and Gaunt. And so, yeah, she kind of goes through the different arguments in order to try to get them to, spur them to action.
Right. And that's going to come up later too in the play towards the end, when we talk about when is it right, when is it acceptable to kill or take revenge in this world, and when is it not, and who is it acceptable to take revenge against, and when it's not. Okay, well, let's move on to, I guess, really our first scene of the night. This is one I've kind of broadly labeled Hope versus Despair. This is Act 1, Scene 3. This is going to be lines 281 through 316 for our actors. This is Shane playing John of Gaunt, the father of Henry Bolingbroke, played by Nick. And this is immediately following Richard II's proclamation of banishment for Henry Bolingbroke. He's banished both Mowbray and Henry. Rather than letting them fight it out, he's banished them both. Now, he's banished, it's worth noting, he's banished Mowbray forever, but he's banished Bolingbroke initially for 10 years, and then he sort of relents and takes 4 years away and banishes him for 6 years. But regardless, Bolingbroke has now been banished for 6 years, and this is their father-son meeting right before the banishment begins. So guys, when you're ready, take it away.
All places that the eye of heaven visits are to a wise man ports and happy havens. Teach thy necessity to reason thus. There is no virtue like necessity. Think not the king did banish thee, but thou the king. Woe doth the heavier sit where it perceives it is but faintly born. Go. Say I sent thee forth to purchase honor, and not the king exiled thee. Or suppose devouring pestilence hangs in our air, and thou art flying to a fresher clime. Look, what thy soul holds dear, imagine it to lie that way thou goest, not whence thou comest. Suppose the singing birds musicians, the grass whereon thou treadest, the presents strewed, the flowers fair ladies, and thy steps no more than a delightful measure or a dance. For gnarling sorrow hath less power to bite the man that mocks at it and sets it light.
Oh, who can hold a fire in his hand by thinking on the frosty Caucasus? Or cloy the hungry edge of appetite by bare imagination of a feast? Or wallow naked in December snow by thinking on fantastic summer's heat? Oh, no, the apprehension of the good gives but the greater feeling to the worse. Fell sorrow's tooth doth never rankle more than when he bites but lanceth not the sore.
Come, come, my son, I'll bring thee on thy way. Had I thy youth and cause, I would not stay.
Then England's ground, farewell. Sweet soil, adieu. My mother and my nurse that bears me yet. Where'er I wander, boast of this I can, though banished, yet a true-born Englishman.
All right, very nice. Very nice read, guys. Thank you. Yeah, any initial thoughts on this? For me, I just wanted to say the reason I picked this scene is because, number one, it's a sort of a heartbreaking scene, because what we skipped over was Gaunt has quite a lot where he says, look, I'll be dead by the time my son comes back. And indeed he is, and it's heartbreaking. But the other thing I would point out is that the Hamlet aspect of this, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I can be bounded in a nutshell and count myself the king of infinite space, where not that I have bad dreams, right? So that here we have Bolingbroke, Gaunt and Bolingbroke looking at the same thing from two completely different sides. And ironically, you have the older man who has the experience, who really knows he's going to be dead before his son returns. So by all rights, should be the one that's more depressed and negative about it, frankly, but he's the one putting on the brave face, telling his son to have an adventure, to look at the bright side, essentially. And you have the young man who has the world before him and could use it as a way to seek his fortune and fame and adventure, and he's looking at it with despair. The last thing that I would point out is that he does end by saying, yet all of this is sort of salved by the fact that even though I'm banished, I am a true-born Englishman. So there's this comfort in England. There's this comfort in being in your country, the power of your country, the power of your land, and who you are and where you're from, and legacy is vital. That sort of ends the scene. Anyone else? What else comes to mind?
And I think to even speak more to what you were talking about how his father is the one that has all of this hope, that I think and he knows that he's about to die, so it's almost as if he's giving his son all of the life that he has left, because he's saying, you know, think of it as a second life. It's not necessarily an end. Try and think of it as a beginning. I think someone else was about to speak.
The option's not good for Bolingbroke. Could he immediately go and raise an army and try to conquer? That would not go well. So, or take it too hard and you know, commit suicide or whatever it is. He wants his son to survive the banishment and come back.
Right. I think. Right. Well, good. You know, speaking of country and your reputation of country, let's actually move on to the next little moment. This is actually John of Gaunt. Shane will be reading John of Gaunt. This is, I called this Reputation of Country. And this is really, it's after the banishment, but it is now, we see John of Gaunt, we see him older, beaten down, older by, not, many days, but older in the sense of the world has now weighed upon him. He's talking to York in this scene, his brother, right? These two are the remaining two uncles of Richard. Remember, Gloucester's been killed, but York and Gaunt are now both uncles of Richard, and they are speaking to each other, and Gaunt is lamenting what is happening to England, to his country. So Shane, when you're ready, take it away.
This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war. This happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this England, this realm, this nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings, feared by their breed and famous by their birth, renowned for their deeds as far from home for Christian service and true chivalry as is the sepulchre and stubborn jewelry of the world's ransom, blessed Mary's Son. This land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation through the world, is now leased out. I die pronouncing it, like to a tenement or pelting farm. England, bound in with the triumphant sea, whose rocky shore beats back the envious siege of watery Neptune, is now bound in with shame, with inky blots and rotten parchment bonds. This England that was wont to conquer others has made a shameful conquest of itself. Ah, would the scandal vanish with my life, how happy then were my ensuing death.
Very nice read. Okay, immediate thoughts or reactions to that?
I think it's a beautiful, well-written speech, and you can hear the heartbreak in this speech about how he had such pride in his country, and when he talks about leasing out, what's happening is that King Richard has been trying to fund all of these wars. It's in Ireland, and it's not really necessary. None of the common people think it's necessary. And so now he is starting to literally lease out England with these like methods of taxation. And it breaks his heart to see that England is now being kind of sold so that he can fund a war that nobody understands why needs to be had.
So, yeah, I picked this scene again for everything Hailey just said. It's a beautiful rendition of the state of England, not only in what it is, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, teeming womb of royal kings, etc., etc. It's a wonderful bit of propaganda for England. And you remember Shakespeare writing for the Queen. You know, it's a beautiful piece of propaganda. But it's also, like she says, like Hailey said, it is a lament about what's happening to their country, about the shameful conquest of itself. I would the scandal vanish with my life. But it doesn't, of course, vanish with his life. Unfortunately, it goes on. And right after this scene, what we see is John of Gaunt sort of makes a very heated confrontation with Richard, in which he tries to convince him to do the right thing. Fails, unfortunately. Richard is being hounded by a teeming series of yes men, essentially, and Richard is getting bad information from people who are just yes and to his ego. And John of Gaunt leaves, and as in so many of Shakespeare's wonderful older characters, he has great lines, leaves, and promptly dies off stage. And so Richard wastes no time in seizing all of his assets and using them for his war, as Hailey mentioned, this war in Ireland. So now what we have is a situation where we have Henry Bolingbroke, remember, who has been banished. Henry, who should have inherited his father's land, title, money, all of these things. They used to call it land, title, and movables. Has now lost all of it against unlawfully. Richard has seized, even though he's the king, this is an unlawful seizure, right? So now Bolingbroke, Henry Bolingbroke, has a claim to come back to England and stand for his rights, get his property back, and really, by all rights, he was banished as one man. He was banished as the Earl of Hereford, but now he is the Duke of, or I guess the Duke of, is it Duke of Gaunt? Is that what it would be? I don't know if that's ever covered, but he's now inherited this title, essentially.
Lancaster.
Sorry?
It's Lancaster.
Lancaster, sorry. Yes, of course. COVID brain, sorry. Can't think. At any rate, he's now back, and we're going to see a scene between York and Bolingbroke. Erin is going to read York, who is Bolingbroke's uncle, and Bolingbroke has now landed on the shores of England, and he's gathering an army, and this is the confrontation between Uncle York and nephew Bolingbroke. It's very much of a sense of, what are you doing here? How dare you? And we'll hear Bolingbroke's defense of that. So when you're ready, this is, for those of you following along, this is Act 2, Scene 3, lines 85 to 140. Okay.
Here comes his grace in person, my noble uncle.
Show me thy humble heart and not thy knee, whose duty is deceivable and false.
My gracious uncle.
Tut, tut. Grace me no grace, nor uncle me no uncle. I am no traitor's uncle, and that word grace, in an ungracious mouth, is but profane. Why have those banished and forbidden legs dared once to touch a dust of England's ground? But then more why have they dared to march so many miles upon her peaceful bosom, frighting her pale-faced villages with war and ostentation of despised arms? Comest thou because the anointed king is hence? Why, foolish boy, the king is left behind, and in my loyal bosom lies his power. Were I but now lord of such a hot youth, as when brave Gaunt thy father and myself rescued the Black Prince, that young Mars of men, from forth the ranks of many thousand French, oh, then, how quickly should this arm of mine, now prisoner to the palsy, chastise thee and minister correction to thy fault.
My gracious uncle, let me know my fault. On what condition stands it and wherein?
Even in condition of the worst degree, in gross rebellion and detested treason. Thou art a banished man, and here art come, before the expiration of thy time, in braving arms against thy sovereign.
As I was banished herefore, but as I come for Lancaster. And, noble uncle, I beseech your grace, look on my wrongs with an indifferent eye. You are my father, for methinks in you I see old Gaunt alive. Oh, then, my father, will you permit that I shall stand condemned, a wandering vagabond, with my rights and royalties plucked from my arms perforce and given away to upstart upthrifts? Wherefore was I born? If that my cousin king be king in England, it must be granted I am Duke of Lancaster. You have a son, Armero, my noble cousin. Had you first died and he had been thus trod down, he should have found his uncle Gaunt a father, to rouse his wrongs and chase them to the bay. I am denied to sue my livery here, and yet my letters patents give me leave. My father's goods are all distrained and sold, and these are all misemployed. What would you have me do? I am a subject, and I challenge law. Attorneys are denied me, and therefore personally I lay my claim to my inheritance of free descent.
Very good. Okay, we'll just stop there. Very nice. So I picked this scene. Again, this is interesting to me because you start with York, who has been now put in charge. He's essentially the regent, really, in Richard's absence, as he's in Ireland, to take care of the kingdom. So when Bolingbroke comes back, it's his job to confront this traitor, essentially. Bolingbroke is a traitor. He's coming back against being banished. He's also raising arms against the king. But it's interesting, this very forceful, tut, tut, grace me no grace, nor uncle me no uncle. I am no traitor's uncle, right? His very forceful language. By the end of it, Bolingbroke has made a very solid argument that, it almost factually based. I was banished as one man, but now I'm different. I only come for what's mine. These things have been taken from me unlawfully. So it's a very metered and sort of almost leveled argument that's very logistical, or it's very logic based in many ways. You have a son, O'Merrill, my noble cousin. You first died and he'd been thus trod down. He should have found his uncle Gaunt a father to rouse his wrongs and chase him to the bay. So again, what he's saying is, if you had a son this had happened to, my father would have stood up for him had he been alive, so you should stand up for me. It's all family, right? Family inheritance. So that's kind of why I picked it. What do you guys think about the scene?
I think there's a constant theme throughout this play of precedent, and it's like you're setting precedent, and it might not be the best precedent that you're setting. We don't disinherit. We don't ignore the laws of primogeniture. We don't kill kings. I think it kind of it harkens back to the Duchess of Gloucester, and when she says, listen, if you don't stand up for this, this could happen to you too. So I think it's those echoes of precedent throughout the play.
I think it also harkens back to that monologue in the sense that like Bolingbroke says, like, in you I see my father. And in the Duchess's monologue, she refers to the seven brothers as like seven branches of the same tree. So it's very much like you have a responsibility to the same blood that runs in your veins, that ran in my father's, that runs in mine. Like there is a literal connection between us that demands a certain level of respect and responsibility.
Yeah. And notice he doesn't throw Richard under the bus ever. He doesn't really directly speak against the king, because again, remember, Richard's his kin as well.
Right.
And so, but beyond that, he's the king. But he never throws him under the bus. He simply says, look, this is what's right. And essentially, you know it and I know it, you know. And this is a bad precedent, and we need to resolve this. However, for those men who are not royal and are not related, they suffer a somewhat worser fate. So we're going to now skip to Bolingbroke, which will be read by Shane, actually. This is when Bushy and Green, two of Richard's sort of co-conspirators, basically the two of the yes men that have been filling Richard's head with bad info, are caught and brought before Bolingbroke to face their punishment. And this is what Bolingbroke has to say to them. For those of you following along, this is Act 3, Scene 1. This is going to be lines 1 through 31, and this will be read by Shane. So when you're ready, Shane, take it away.
Bring forth these men, Bushy and Green. I will not vex your souls, since presently your souls must part your bodies, with too much urging to your pernicious lives, for 'twere no charity. Yet, to wash your blood from off my hands, here in the view of men, I will unfold some causes of your deaths. You have misled a prince, a royal king, a happy gentleman in blood and lineaments, by you unhappy. Tim, betwixt his queen and him, broke the possession of a royal bed, and stained the beauty of a fair queen's cheeks with tears drawn from her eyes by your foul wrongs. Myself, a prince by fortune of my birth, near to the king in blood and near in love, till you did make him misinterpret me, have stooped my neck under your injuries, and sighed my English breath in foreign clouds, eating the bitter bread of banishment, while you have fed upon my signories, dispatched my parks, and felled my forest woods, and from my own windows turned my household coat, raised out my impress, leaving me no sign save men's opinions and my living blood to show the world I am a gentleman. This, and much more than all this, condemns you to the death. See them delivered over to execution in the hand of death.
Very nice read. Thank you, Shane. I picked this scene because I think it's important. It shows the side of forgiveness or lack thereof that is expressed towards traitors, and also traitors of a somewhat lower class, although they are still nobility. They are not royal, or in this case, not tied directly to the king and his kin. But he also mentions, and I think this is an interesting point worth talking about, you have misled a king. They have misled a prince, rather, a royal king. And he later then even says, you have made the king misinterpret me. So it is about politics, it is about whisperings, it is about how you are made to understand facts, right? And what that can do to a situation. So what are all of your thoughts about this?
I think most interesting about this whole speech is that before he lists any of the grievances that those two men have done to him, he lists the grievances that they did to the king first, which is weird because, you know, the king's not exactly friends with him right now, for lack of a better term. But I think that really shows that Bolingbroke is trying to, you know, say that it's not necessarily about me, but you guys have also disgraced the crown of England, and about the influence and the misleading of those two gentlemen is that Richard II became king at the age of 10 years old. and he had to constantly listen to people above him telling him how to rule. And that is, I mean, he's had to listen to people his entire life telling him and making decisions. And I think that contributes to the decisions he makes and the ending of this play.
No, it is quite interesting that he stands up, he states the cause for Richard before his own grievances. Nick, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just thought it was interesting that it, like, something that's sort of repeated throughout the show, especially once like Richard comes into it, is like the nobles, the like gentry, and especially this family that's in power, they're all very sort of, they're almost hypocritical about their use and monopoly of power, because like not to spoil anything, but at the, like, there's a line that comes later when someone says like those who most desire the use of poison like hate the use of it, basically saying like, even though like I want so bad something to happen, like when it does happen I get very angry about it. And it's like this, it's just like these men were, I mean, bad advisors, but he charges them with misleading a king, so like they lied and now they're being executed. And then like someone, perhaps the king, like stole an inheritance, started a war and killed a couple thousand people, and he is like worthy of clemency and like what needs to be understood and respected still, just because of who he is. And I think it's really interesting how they play around with this sort of dichotomy of like, you can't do this thing, but I can because my daddy said so.
Right, and also because God ordained it, right? God ordained the king, and whatever the king says must be coming from God, and so therefore it's right. And if you question the king, you're questioning God, and you're questioning the world's order, which, as Erin, I think, said a little earlier, that's a bad precedent. We don't want to do that, you know?
Well, and Bolingbroke's very clever because he's kind of staging his legitimacy. So let's start with the council. Let's start with, the people that surround the king, and then we'll make our way. The next level will be, now we delegitimize the king. So he's working in stages, because I think if he just came, flat out, it's like in the previous scene with, he has a very logical argument. I mean, it has good legal standing. We wouldn't throw it out of court.
Right.
So
I hate to bring up the Magna Carta, but
Right.
that's one of the things that's forbidden by the Magna Carta, is taking man's lands for his own use without reason. And he doesn't charge against Richard, but he does take the men who, and Richard was the one who said it. He says it really early in the play. As soon as John of Gaunt is dead, he says, we'll take his lands and use that money and goods to invade Ireland. He just says it right off. And the men who do it are, I guess, Pushy and Green. Right. And he doesn't attack Richard, but he does attack his surroundings.
Well, good. So let's actually move forward then to talk with Richard. This is our first intro to Richard, actually. We haven't yet tonight touched on Richard, so we'll give him some airplay here. Nick, this will be reading Richard. This is actually at Richard's return to England, his first setting foot back on English soil after being in Ireland and faring very poorly in those wars. And he hears of this revolt, this treason plot going on in his country, and he's trying to raise an army. And what he's finding by degrees is that no one is coming to his aid. He's being virtually left to sort of fend for himself. So this is what I've sort of broadly labeled as a scene of despair. For those of you following along in your scripts, this is Act 3, Scene 2. This is lines 150 through 182, and this will be Nick reading Richard. So take it away, Nick.
Of comfort no man speak. Let's talk of graves, of worms and epitaphs. Make dust our paper, and with rainy eyes write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executors and talk of wills. And yet not so, for what can we bequeath save our deposed bodies to the ground? Our lands, our lives, and all are Bolingbroke's, and nothing we call our own but death, and that small model of the barren earth which serves as paste and cover to our bones. For God's sake, let's sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the deaths of kings. How some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed, all murdered. For within the hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court. And there the antic sits, scoffing his state and grinning at his pomp, allowing him a breath, a little scene, to monarchize, be feared, and kill with looks, infusing him with self and vain conceit, as if this flesh which walls about our life were brass impregnable. And humoured thus, comes at the last, and with a little pin bores through his castle wall, and farewell, king! Cover your heads, and mock not flesh and blood with solemn reverence. Throw away respect, tradition, form, and ceremonious duty, for you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you, feel want, taste grief, need friends. Subjected thus, how can you say to me, I am a king?
Very nice, Nick. Thank you very much for that. Bring our actors back online here. So yeah, I picked this scene. Really, it's a very famous speech, for one, of course. And I kind of cut, or didn't really, actually, we did the whole thing. This is the Hollow Crown speech. It really, to me, echoes Henry V's speech in Henry V, upon the king, when he's comparing what happens a king's life is in many ways very similar. We still feel need, we still have want, we still need friends, but we're expected to do and have all of this power and pressure on him. And to me, it's really the first cracking in the facade that we see of Richard, because up till now, and I know we haven't really read a lot of his earlier scenes or really any of them, but up till now, Richard has put forth this face of power, of confidence, of swagger, even. And now we're seeing the cracks, because it's really that sort of tyrannical, authoritarian personality that wants to take hold of power, but at very early signs of challenge is kind of cracks and crumbles and lets it go. Anyway, that's kind of initial thoughts on it. Nick, Hailey, anyone in the room, what are your reads?
Yeah, I think that this speech is echoes not only Richard's beliefs, but I mean, I think it's a universal belief that, heavy is the head that wears the crown. He believed that all personal honor and glory flowed through the king, and that the crown was a burden that was placed on his head. And I think that he talks this way about all of the kings as well, saying that some of them die in great honorable ways. Some of them don't. And, I think it does come to question, what are the burdens of power?
And I think that it's something that he seems like preoccupied with in this speech is how, like, as soon as a king is crowned, everyone is thinking about how the king is going to die, because then that means then who is next going to be the king. And very, very rarely in this point in time was there a transfer of power from king to king that didn't end in the death of the king, whether natural or unnatural. And I just think we talked about this yesterday, going through some more of Richard's scenes about how he instantly swings to almost basically giving up, saying like, there's nothing that we own anymore except our bones and our flesh, that Bolingbroke has already won, and that he's going to take everything from us, and all we can do is die. And I just think it's really interesting that the figurehead of the state immediately swings to this level of despair.
Right, and there's so much in this play put on the idea and the office of king, the office of even nobles, but especially of the king, and what that does to and how it deteriorates the man or woman that has to hold that office. So there's this respect for and awe of the power and the sway of the office, as we've seen with Bolingbroke a minute ago, and as we'll continue to see, the power of the king. But at what cost? What does it do to the man, Richard? And so the options for Richard become smaller and smaller and smaller and more narrowed. So let's move to this next scene that I picked. It's very brief, but I thought it was quite telling. It's actually 3-3, lines 148 to 159. 3-3, 148 to 159. This is something I've just lately. He's further down the road towards his own abdication, and this will be Richard being read by Andie. So Andie, when you're ready, take it away.
What must the king do now? Must he submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented. Must he lose the name in king? In God's name, let it go. I'll give my jewels for a set of beads, my gorgeous palace for a hermitage, my gay apparel for an alsman's gown, my figured goblets for a dish of wood, my scepters for a palmer's walking staff, my subjects for a pair of carved saints, and my large kingdom for a little grave. A little grave, an obscure grave.
Very nice. All right. As promised, a very quick little scene, but I thought it was very telling. In that one little scene, he says grave 3 times, talks about his own demise, kind of paints himself into a corner. Must he be deposed? The king, the king, the king. He starts the speech talking about the king in the third person, really. And he finishes that little speech, my. In fact, 5 lines in a row, 5 verse lines in a row, he begins with my, capital M-Y, my gorgeous palace, my gay apparel, my figured goblets, my scepter, and my subjects. All gone. He wants to trade them for a grave. I think it's telling. It's almost Shakespeare writing a textual reference of giving away your crown. He goes from third person king to my things to a grave. Thoughts?
I mean, also, like, we talked earlier about how, like, this was just all thrown at him at a young age, and I feel like when we think of kings, we think of how amazing it is to have their lifestyle, but he's listing all the stuff that he's aware that he has, but how he's willing to trade it all for, like, the lowest of the low. And I think that's just really telling of where he's at mentally.
Anyone else? No, that was kind of a yes.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think it's also very telling for a king who, by all lights, I mean, they talk about how he's obsessed with these fashions, and he lives he's almost like narcissistic, and he's very preoccupied with his own self-image to say, I'm going to give up all of these things and become like live a very minimalistic life to give up all of this. And for someone so preoccupied with image, you know, I also wonder if there's some kind of, or at least in his mind, if there's any kind of grace that comes from accepting defeat.
Good point. Is there grace in accepting your own defeat? I mean, is there something to be gained from admitting when you've lost? Good question. I'm hearing a lot of interference from like a wind or something. If someone has their mic on and we're hearing a lot of wind. Oh, okay.
Stop.
Gotcha.
Comment, and then I'll mute after the comment.
Okay, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
You skipped my favorite in there where he gets arrogant again. We are amazed, and thus long have we stood. What's interesting to me is the way he keeps going up and down. And of course, now he's back down again, and he's eventually going out of power. But to me, that's fascinating. He's like he's bipolar or something.
Yeah, he's very manic in a way. It's like he's manic depressive in some sort of weird way. You're right, Chris, he goes back and forth between being very confident. In fact, in the scene we read earlier with Nick, where he finally says, let's talk of graves, let's be despairing, all of these things. He actually had a few moments where he was convinced that he could win, where he had an army, and then finally he just says, nah, we've got nothing. So, you know, there is this, you're right. It's a very, it's sort of manic. You never know where he's going to land. So that's a great observation. Let's do this. I want to move on to a scene that I'm calling Common Wisdom. This is one of my favorite scenes in this play. Some of my favorite scenes in any of Shakespeare's plays is when the common man gets to speak, right? Oftentimes you have commoners come in, sort of interstitial scenes, and they sort of say something about the royals, and then they walk off stage and you never see them again. Well, in this scene, we actually have the commoners speaking about what's going on in the world of the royal world and how it's sort of affecting them or the way they see it. But then you have the queen who's actually in hiding, overhears it, and steps on stage to confront the common man, which I think is really fascinating. And I don't know if it's unique in Shakespeare, but it's pretty rare that a commoner and a royal have this sort of heated discussion. So this is going to have Shane as the gardener, Nick as the under gardener, essentially. The queen will be played by Andie. This is Act 3, Scene 4. This is going to be lines 32 through 108. All right. So when you're ready, guys, take it away. Oop.
You're muted.
Go, bind thou up yon dangling apricocks, which like unruly children make their sire stoop with oppression of their prodigal weights. Give thou some supportance to the bending twigs. Go thou, and like an executioner cut off the heads of too fast growing sprays that look too lofty in our commonwealth. All must be even in our government. You thus employed, I will go root away the noisome weeds which without profit suck the soil's fertility from wholesome flowers.
Why should we, in the compass of a pail, keep law and form and due proportion, showing as in a model our firm estate, when our sea-walled garden, the whole land, is full of weeds, her fairest flowers choked up, her fruit trees all unpruned, her hedges ruined, her knots disordered, and her wholesome herbs swarming with caterpillars.
Hold thy peace. He that hath suffered this disordered spring hath now himself met with the fall of leaf. The weeds which his broad spreading leaves did shelter, that seemed in eating him to hold him up, are plucked up by root and all by Bolingbroke. I mean the Earl of Wiltshire, bushy, green.
What, are they dead?
They are. And Bolingbroke hath seized the wasteful king. Oh, what a pity is it that he had not so trimmed and dressed his land as we his garden. We at this time of year do wound the bark, the skin of our fruit trees, lest being overproud in sap and blood, with too much riches it confounds itself. Had he done so to great and growing men, they might have lived to bear and eat, taste the fruits of their duty. Superfluous branches we lop away, that bearing boughs may live, had borne the crown, which waste of idle hours hath quite thrown down.
What, think you the king shall be deposed?
Depressed he is already, and deposed 'tis doubt he will be. Letters came last night to a dear friend of the good Duke of York's that tell bad tidings.
Oh, I am pressed to death through want of speaking. Thou old Adam's likeness, set to dress this garden, how dares thy harsh rude tongue sound this unpleasing news? What Eve, what serpent hath suggested thee to make a second fall of cursed man? Why dost thou say King Richard is deposed? Darest thou, thou little better thing than earth, divine his downfall? Say where, when, and how camest thou by this ill tidings? Speak, thou wretch.
Pardon me, madam. Little joy have I to breathe this news, yet what I say is true. King Richard, he is in the mighty hold of Bolingbroke. Their fortunes are both weighed. In your lord's scale is nothing but himself, and in some few vanities that make him light. But in the balance of great Bolingbroke, besides himself, are all the English peers. And with that odds, he weighs King Richard down. Post you to London, you will find it so. I speak no more than every one doth know.
Nimble mischance that are so light of foot, doth not thy embassage belong to me, and am I last that knows it? Oh, thou thinkest to serve me last, that I may longest keep thy sorrow in my breast. Come, ladies, go to meet at London, London's king in woe. What was I born to this, that my sad look should grace the triumphant of great Bolingbroke? Gardener, for telling me these news of woe, pray God that plants thou graftest may never grow.
Poor queen, so that thy state might be no worse, I would my skill were subject to thy curse. Here she did fall a tear, here in this place outside a bank of rue, sour herb of grace, rue even for Ruth. Here shortly shall be seen in the remembrance of weeping queen.
Very nice read, you guys. Very nice. Initial thoughts on that from anyone?
I think.
Well,
Oh,
go ahead,
Hailey,
Erin.
go ahead. Like you said earlier, you were really drawn to this scene because it's very interesting. You have Shakespeare does have lots of instances where you have commoners commenting on affairs of state, and it's kind of a safe way to comment on affairs of state without being accused of treason and being drawn and quartered and all of that good stuff. But it is interesting because in this one, the head of state is there. And is interacting. So it's always fascinating to me how Shakespeare does make that political commentary at a safe distance. So that's that.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
true. Shakespeare can use the gardener to criticize the ill use of government.
Mm-hmm.
The gardener, as he begins, he makes his own metaphor from the beginning. That's
Yep.
how he starts. The Garden
Oh,
of the Commonwealth.
One thing that I can't help but notice is throughout the night as the lines keep getting spoken, to find the parallels that exist between the political atmosphere during Richard II and the current political atmosphere. And it's clearly not the time or place to talk about today's politics right now, but the one conclusion I can draw is that the more things change, the more they remain the same. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and even to draw that parallel, not to get us too off track, but fast forward to 1601, the Earl of Essex actually was trying to plot a coup against Queen Elizabeth and her Privy Council. And so he got one of his BFFs to go and ask the Lord Chamberlain's men to perform Richard II. And they're like, we don't want to do that. It's an old play. And he's like, I'll pay you 40 shillings. And they're like, okay, we'll do it. And the hope was that they would kind of get the crowds, the populace of London, the lower classes, behind the Earl of Essex. It didn't work. He was eventually tried for treason and drawn and quartered, as was his good friend, Gelly Myrick. He was all and Gelly just asked him to put on a play. So yeah, it echoes through eternity.
Right.
What are you getting us into here, Tyler?
So no, that's great. I like, Shane points out, I mean, he does draw his own metaphor of how to govern, and he draws it to gardening, and judiciously pruning a garden and judiciously maintaining the growth for the next season, and how these are things. And it's funny, Shakespeare often does this. He almost boils down, governance or great matters, whatever they may be, to a very simple, almost formulaic structure that he then presents, usually from a common man in his plays. Let's actually move forward to when Richard becomes a common man. This is now going to be Act 4, Scene 1. This is line 170 to 185. Erin is going to read Richard. This is after Richard is been asked to give up, to leave his throne. And this is actually the scene in which he physically, literally does it. But this is when he's been called before Bolingbroke to answer for himself. So Erin, when you're ready, take it away.
Alack, why am I sent for to a king before I have shook off the regal thoughts wherewith I reigned? I hardly yet have learned to insinuate, flatter, bow, and bend my knee. Give sorrow leave a while to tutor me to this submission. Yet I well remember the favors of these men. Were they not mine? Did they not sometime cry, all hail to me? So Judas did to Christ, but he in 12 found truth in all but one. I in 12,000, none. God save the king. Will no man say amen? Am I both priest and clerk? Well then, amen. God save the king, although I be not he, and yet, amen, if heaven do think him me. To do what service am I sent for hither?
Very nice read, Erin. Thank you. Again, I picked this scene because it is Richard being called before the council, before the royals, to officially renounce his title. And he is being, one thing that occurred to us last night when we were kind of rehearsing this and discussing it was how much he calls upon holy imagery or even Christ-like imagery in this. Erin, did you want to speak to that a little bit?
No, I mean, you're right. And we harken back to the speech where he basically says, I'm going to live a life monastic. He's very, he thinks himself a martyr. It's really interesting because he has these kind of inflated images of himself, whether it's how great a king he is and how wonderful and noble a ruler. He makes these very wonderful decisions. Well, you're going to be exiled, forever, and you're going to be exiled for 5 years. And even in defeat, he still has, I feel, this inflated image of himself.
He
Go ahead,
literally compares himself to Christ. I think it also, just in that same portion of text, when he says that Christ found truth in one person among 12, he said, I found no truth among 12,000. And so I think it's also him coming to terms. I mean, if he hasn't before, he is now coming to terms with the fact that, everyone he's known has been lying to him his whole life.
Yeah, it's as you both say, and as Erin, you pointed out, it's this idea that this inflated sense of self, and it's just irrepressible almost, to the point where, yes, he compares himself to Christ. And he's lamenting, he's beginning to lament what he's lost. It wasn't long ago that I had all of this power. It wasn't long ago that you all bowed to me. And he does say one thing that I think is interesting. He says, I hardly yet have learned to insinuate, flatter, bow, and bend my knee. So it's almost like he knows that the loyalty he was being shown is full of falsehoods, insinuations, and really only owed to, again, the office of king, not necessarily to himself. But let's actually move on to where Richard and Bolingbroke now, who is the king, Richard has given up his crown, he's abdicated the throne officially to Henry Bolingbroke, making him Henry IV. And this is a quick little scene, interesting scene, little stage direction note. It involves a mirror. Hailey's going to read some stage directions for this, but it involves a mirror, and it involves the vanity, personal vanity, and what that can do to someone of power, and how that can drive them and their decision making. So this is going to be Act 4, Scene 1, lines 287 to 315. Erin will be reading Richard, and Nick will be reading Bolingbroke. So whenever you're ready, guys, take it away.
Give me that glass, and therein will I read. No deeper wrinkles yet. Hath sorrow struck so many blows upon this face of mine, and made no deeper wounds? Oh, flattering glass, like to my followers in prosperity, thou dost beguile me. Was this face, the face that every day under his household roof did keep 10,000 men? Was this the face that like the sun did make beholders wink? Is this the face which faced so many follies, that was at last outfaced by Bolingbroke? A brittle glory shineth in this face, as brittle as the glory is the face.
He breaks the mirror.
For there 'tis, cracked in 100 shivers. Mark, silent king, the moral of this sport. How soon my sorrow hath destroyed my face.
The shadow of your sorrow hath destroyed the shadow of your face.
Say that again. The shadow of my sorrow? Huh, let's see. 'Tis very true. My grief lies all within, and these external manners of laments are merely shadows to the unseen grief that swells with silence in the tortured soul. There lies the substance, and I thank thee, King, for thy great bounty that not only givest me cause to wail, but teachest me the way how to lament the cause. I'll beg one boon, and then be gone, and trouble you no more.
Very nice read. Thank you guys very much. Yeah, so initial thoughts on this little scene here.
And in this scene, you have a man, as we've already talked about, who is very obsessed with his own self-image, literally confronting his own self-image. And I think also, at least the question that I had while I was reading this, you know, is there almost like this sense of vanity that comes in personal sorrow, like an excessive self-pity or wallowing almost, in a way, because I mean he sits there and says, you know, this sorrow is deepening my face, and I think, you know, he is kind of wallowing a little bit in certain parts in this play,
Yeah.
at least I read.
Yeah, and again, he says, what does he say? Oh, flattering glass, like to my followers in prosperity, thou dost beguile me. So again, he's referring to the false support of the king writ large when things are going good. Again, the office of the king, but personally, he's very upset. He feels very betrayed. And then I think it's very interesting. What does Bolingbroke say? The shadow of your sorrow hath destroyed the shadow of your face. Again, I go back to this idea that I get from Hamlet of nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. You have the shadow that is haunting you, this shadow, this story that you have told yourself. That's what's destroying you. You had every opportunity, Richard, to do the right thing along the way, and you have taken none of them. And I think at this point, you know, it's really fascinating to me the way Richard curls in upon himself and decides that it is, you know, it's sort of the world against him. It gives me cause to wail, but teaches me the way to lament the cause. It's this curling in upon yourself, this self-lament, self-imposed, you know, gnashing of teeth and beating of breast, that he's doing these things. Let's move to parting of unions. This is going to be the Queen and Richard saying goodbye. Of course, a forced separation here. This is Act 5, Scene 1, lines 26 through 51. This is going to be Erin reading the Queen and Nick reading Richard. Again, this is after Richard has been sent to the Tower, which, if you know anything about English history, that never ends well. And soon to be, the Queen is going to, they think that they can have a life where she can go off, but there's this forced, there's more woe to come, essentially, but it's a forced separation. Let's read this when you are ready. Guys, take it away.
What? Is my Richard both in shape and mind transformed and weakened? Hath Bolingbroke deposed thine intellect? Hath he been in thy heart? The lion, dying, thrusteth forth his paw, and wounds the earth, if nothing else, with rage to be o'erpowered. And wilt thou, pupil-like, take the correction? Mildly kiss the rod, and fawn on rage with base humility, which art a lion and the king of beasts.
A king of beasts, indeed. If aught but beasts, I had been still a happy king of men. Good sometimes, Queen, prepare thee hence for France. Think I am dead, and that even here thou takest, as from my deathbed, thy last living leave. In winter's tedious night, sit by the fire with good old folks, and let them tell thee tales of woeful ages long ago betid. And ere thou bid good night, to quiet their griefs, tell thou the lamentable tale of me, and send the hearers weeping to their beds. For why? The census brands will sympathize the heavy accent of thy moving tongue, and in compassion weep the fire out. And some will mourn in ashes, some coal black, for the deposing of a rightful king.
Nice read. Thank you guys very much. So yeah, this is a scene where a husband is being forced away from his wife, and two things happen to me that are very interesting. Number one, the wife exhorts her husband to stand up for himself. Once again, we see for the second time in this play a very strong female character exhorting a male character to stand up and fight, right?
Do something.
Do something, exactly. So, and then, but what is Richard's response is not only this sort of self-lament, but it's more than that. It's this almost folkloric spinning of his own tale, you know, in winter's tedious nights, sit by the fire with good old folks and let them tell thee tales of woeful ages long ago betid. I mean, it's this almost Wagnerian rendition of history, you know, it's this idea, again, this authoritarian style personality that wants to invent a history, a folklore for himself, that wants to surround himself with this idea of who he is, regardless of what he is, right? So, and then finally he says, and he ends it by saying, some will mourn in ashes, some coal black for the deposing of a rightful king. He still believes he is the rightful king, and he has been deposed, even though he abdicated his throne. And then I guess the third idea I would put forth is just, there's not a whole lot of sorrow put forth of, dear wife, I'm going to miss you terribly. Oh my God, my heart is broken. No, no, no. It's all about his legacy.
Make sure you get him to tell stories about me.
Right, right. It's all about his legacy.
Right.
What else comes to mind?
And I think also in caring so much about his legacy that it almost kind of jeopardizes the same honor that he is trying to keep to himself, and it's stored within his legacy. Because his wife is saying, you know, have some pride, get up and stand up for this instead of just, you know, lying and taking it. But he's saying, no, I'm, you know, tell my story. It'll be a great, you know, I'm a rightful king. And she's saying, well, prove that you're a rightful king. And it's, you know, it's saying, like, how can you have this honor that you want to pass on through generations, but you won't even have honor here by fighting for this thing, for your own belief that you're right, the rightful king.
Yeah, right. So speaking of fighting for what you believe is right, let's go to this next scene, which is going to be, I called it pleading for pardon. It's a very broad label, but this is a scene in which fighting for what is right becomes paramount. So we have the Duke of York, who's going to be read by Shane, has now discovered his son, Ulmeril, who is going to be read by Andie, has plotted against the new king's life, has plotted to take the life of the new king, Henry IV. And rather than trying to work with his son, to forgive his son, to find some reconciliation there, he runs immediately to Henry to turn his own son in, right? Very quickly, Ulmeril's mother, York's wife, is on their heels to plead for the life of their son. So what you have is a scene with a father putting country before family, and a mother putting family and forgiveness before fast-acting vengeance. So here is one time in which actually we have a woman now pleading for clemency, not vengeance, in this play. Again, Erin will be reading The Duchess, Nick will be reading Bolingbroke, Andie is Ulmeril, and Shane will be reading York. For those of you in your scripts, this is Act 5, Scene 3, lines 43 through 137. And Hailey is going to read a few of the stage directions. So when you're ready, guys, take it away.
Starts with me. Oh, am I on? My liege, beware, look to thyself. Thou hast a traitor in the presence there.
Villain, I'll make thee safe.
Stay thy revengeful hand, thou hast no cause to fear.
Open the door. Secure, foolhardy king. Shall I for love speak treason to thy face? Open the door or I will break it open.
King Henry unlocks the door.
What is the matter, uncle? Speak. Recover breath. Tell us how near is danger, that we may arm us to encounter it.
Peruse this writing here, and thou shalt know the treason that my haste forbids me show.
Remember, as thou readest, thy promised pass. I do repent me. Read not my name there. My heart is not confederate with my hand.
It was, villain, ere thy hand had set it down. I tore it from the traitor's bosom, king. Fear and not love begets his penitence. Forget to pity him, lest thy pity prove a serpent that will sting.
Oh, heinous, strong and bold conspiracy. Oh, loyal father of a treacherous son. Thou sheer, immaculate, and silver fountain, from whence this stream, through muddy passages, hath held his current and defiled himself. Thy overflow of good converts to bad, and thy abundant goodness shall excuse this deadly blot in thy digressing son.
So shall my virtue be his vice's bawd, and he shall spend mine honor with his shame, as thriftless sons their scraping father's gold. Mine honor lives when his dishonor dies, or my shamed life in his dishonor lies. Thou killest me in his life, giving him breath. The traitor lives, the true man's put to death.
But how, my liege, for God's sake, let me in!
What shrill-voiced suppliant makes this eager cry?
A woman, and thy aunt, great king, 'tis I. Speak with me, pity me, open the door. A beggar begs that never begged before.
Our scene is altered from a serious thing, and now changed to the beggar and the king. My dangerous cousin, let your mother in. I know she has come to pray for your foul sin.
If thou do pardon whosoever pray, more sins for this forgiveness prosper may. This festered joint cut off, the rest sound. This let alone will all the rest confound.
O king, believe not this hard-hearted man. Love loving not itself, none other can.
Thou frantic woman, what dost thou make here? Shall thy old dogs once more a traitor rear?
Sweet York, be patient. Hear me, gentle liege.
Rise up, good aunt.
Not yet, I thee beseech. Forever will I walk upon my knees, and never see day that the happy sees, till thou give joy, until thou bid me joy by pardoning Rutland, my transgressing boy.
Unto my mother's prayers I bend my knee.
Against them both my true joints bended be. Ill mayest thou thrive if thou grant any grace.
Bleeds he in earnest? Look upon his face. His eyes do drop no tears, his prayers are in jest. His words come from his mouth, ours from our breast. He prays but faintly and would be denied. We pray with heart and soul and all beside. His weary joints would gladly rise, I know. Our knees still kneel till the ground they grow. His prayers are full of false hypocrisy, ours of true zeal and deep integrity. Our prayers do outpray his, then let them have that mercy which true prayer ought to have.
Good aunt, stand up.
Nay, do not say stand up. Say pardon first, and afterwards stand up. And if I were thy nurse, thy tongue to teach, pardon would be the first word of thy speech. I never longed to hear a word till now. Say pardon, king. Let pity teach thee how. The word is short, but not so short as sweet. No word like pardon for kings' mouths so meet.
Speak it in French, king, say pardon-moi.
Dost thou teach pardon, pardon to destroy? Ah, my sour husband, my hard-hearted lord, that sets the word against the word. Speak pardon as 'tis current in our land. The chopping French we do not understand. Thine eye begins to speak, set thy tongue there. Or in thy piteous heart plant thou thine ear, that, hearing how our plaints and prayers do pierce, pity may move thee pardon to rehearse.
Good aunt, stand up!
I do not sue to stand. Pardon is all the suit I have in hand.
I pardon him, as God shall pardon me.
Oh, happy vantage of a kneeling knee. Yet I am sick for fear speak it again. Twice saying pardon doth not pardon twain, but makes one pardon strong.
I pardon him with all my heart.
A God on earth thou art.
All right, very nice, you guys. Very good read. Thank you very much. That was a long scene. I think the longest of the night. I kind of left it uncut from their entrance because I thought it was very interesting. Again, where you have a father pleading for a country over his own family. This sort of reflective of John of Gaunt and his lament about country. Remember, these two are brothers, York and Gaunt. But then you have the mother pleading for clemency, so much so that she is relentless in her pleading of it, so much so that she asks for it twice. She demands he repeat it, right? He solidifies
You gotta seal the deal.
He's gonna seal the deal. And Henry relents. You see a clemency from Henry. You see him pardon him, not pardon with condition. I'm not going to pardon you, but you're banished, or pardon you, but I'm going to seize your lands. It's you are pardoned, right? So we see this difference already between what Richard does when he's presented with actually a whiff of traitors in the early part of the play, and Henry's presented with hard evidence of a traitor, and he pardons him. So I thought that was very fascinating. Anyone have any comments about this scene that they'd like to share, or thoughts?
I mean, I think that you pretty much said it, was that it's showing the foils between King Henry now and King Richard in the beginning with their decisions of how to rule. And I think this is also setting precedence, as Erin was talking about, with what King Henry's reign will be.
Right. So speaking of King Richard and his reign and how that went south, we're going to skip ahead to now. We're going to visit Richard while he's in jail. He is at Pomfret now, which is sort of a notorious place of beheadings for those of you who are familiar with Richard III. But musings on personal loss is what I call this. Now, this is a huge, very famous speech, but I've cut down. I only want to do a few lines of it. Andie is going to read Richard for us. This is going to be Act 5, Scene 5, lines 23 through 41. Again, just a really quick snap of this very famous speech. But Andie, when you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thoughts tending to content flatter themselves that they are not the first of fortune's slaves, nor shall not be the last. Like silly beggars who, sitting in the stocks, refuge their shame that many have and others must sit there. And in this thought they find a kind of ease, bearing their own misfortunes on the back of such as have before endured the like. Thus, play I in one person many people, and none contented. Sometimes am I king, then treasons make me wish myself a beggar, and so I am. Then crushing penury persuades me I was better when a king. Then I am kinged again, and by think I am unkinged by Bolingbroke, and straight am nothing. But whate'er I be, nor I nor any man that but man is with nothing shall be pleased, till he be eased with being nothing.
Great, Andie, thank you so much. So I just picked this snippet out because it is, like we've said earlier, this is a very frantic, a very manic Richard. He's imagining to be many things in one mind. He's trying to build a kingdom in his own mind. But one thing that I thought was interesting was he's finding this sort of relief in, we sort of talked last night, we joked about it, sort of this idea of Schadenfreude, you know, this idea that you can find relief by knowing others are going to feel the same pain that you're feeling, or getting relief or joy out of others' pain, essentially. But it's this sort of warped sense that it's all okay as long as I'm not the last one to suffer this this pain, right? But then he finishes it by saying, nothing shall be, nor I nor any man that but man is with nothing shall be pleased till he be eased with being nothing, till he be dead. You know, nothing will please him till he be dead, or dead in the sense of not being a public figure, having everything taken from him. So it's either dead in fact or dead in I guess the world's view. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on this little speech here?
I think it's sort of like going back to what Hailey told us, that Richard became king when he was 10. So like he spent his whole life with the ability to make the smallest decision and kill like hundreds of people if he accidentally made a mistake, or if he did it on purpose. Like his very words had the weight to kill. And I think he's taking comfort in the fact that it's not any personal fault of his individual that caused him to be overthrown, but that he is just a normal person, and that like these things happen. And I think he's taking the fault off of his own shoulders and putting it on like, well, like this happens to everyone, so it's not my fault. I didn't make a mistake. It wasn't me not being good enough. Like this just happens sometimes. I mean, it's like, it speaks to his sort of like consistent sense of inadequacy.
Right. He's sort of excusing his own failures by saying it happens to everyone, but it doesn't happen to everyone, does it? He's the king. Yeah. You know, he's not every man. And so you're right. He's finding ways of excusing his own failures by comparing himself in his own mind. He's drawing in his own mind. But yeah, he sort of still refuses to see that really he should have been set apart and done things differently. Again, with great power comes great responsibility, but he refused consistently throughout this play to do that. And I think it's a warning to future monarchs to behave better, to do better, you know, and to take that responsibility more seriously. Let's go to, we've just got a few lines to do. I know we're running a little bit long, but I hope you'll indulge us. We're at Pride of Place. This is between Richard, played by Nick, and the groom, played by Shane, the groom of the horses, the royal horses. So this is Act 5, Scene 5, lines 68 through 96. That's what's happened here is that essentially Henry IV has now ridden in triumph through the streets of London on Richard's very own horse. So let's hear how that unfolds. Guys, when you're ready, take it away.
Hail, royal prince.
Thanks, noble peer. The cheapest of us is 10 groats too dear. What art thou, and how comest thou hither, where no man never comes with that sad dog that brings me food to make misfortune live?
I was a poor groom of thy stable, king, when thou wert king, who, travelling towards York, with much ado at length, have gotten leave to look upon my sometime master's face. Oh, how it yearned my heart when I beheld in London streets that coronation day, when Bolingbroke rode on roan Barbary, that horse that thou so oft hast bestrid, that horse that I so carefully have dressed.
Rode he on Barbary? Tell me, gentle friend, how went he under him?
So proudly as if he disdained the ground.
So proud that Bolingbroke was on his back. That jade hath eat bread from my royal hand. This hand hath made him proud with clapping him. Would he not stumble? Would he not fall down, since pride must have a fall, and break the neck of that proud man that did usurp his back? Forgiveness, horse. Why do I rail on thee, since thou, created to be awed by man, wast born to bear? I was not made a horse, and yet
I bear a burden like an ass, spurred, galled, and tired by chancing Bolingbroke.
Very nice read, guys. Thank you very much. So I just picked this little scene about a horse because it is the king lamenting losing his possessions. He's losing his toys. He's losing his power. He's losing all the trappings of his office, and he refuses to let them go, so much so that he almost really says, if I can't have him, nobody should. This horse should have thrown Bolingbroke and broken his back. How dare he ride my horse? This is mine, right? So it's someone who's refusing to accept the transition, right? This new person, and he's taking his toys from him, and he's not real keen on that. To be fair, Henry is also riding his horse as a definite sort of, you know, one of these to Richard. So there is some provocative stuff going on there. He could have ridden any horse, but he chose to ride Richards through the streets. So that is that's a very telling little moment for me. And what's more telling is almost these last two lines. Richard says, "And yet I bear a burden like an ass, spurred, galled, and tired by jouncing Bolingbroke." It's almost like he's beginning to see his own imperfections. He's beginning to go, I am not behaving, I'm not taking this well. Which leads us into this next scene really quickly. This is literally 6 lines I've picked out, but I thought this is very important. This is finally, we'll see Richard actually fights back. For the first time really in the play, we see Richard fighting back in earnest. This is going to be Andie reading Richard and Shane reading The Keeper. Guys, when you're ready, quick 6 lines. This is Act 5, Scene 5, lines 100 through 106.
My lord, will it please you to fall to?
Taste of it first, as thou art wont to do.
My lord, I dare not. Sir Pierce of Exton, who lately came from the king, commands the contrary.
Richard attacking the...
The devil take Henry of Lancaster in thee. Patience is stale, and I am weary of it.
Help! Help! Help!
The murderers, Exton and his men, rush in.
And actually, Andie, will you read that next line for us?
How now? What means death in this rude assault? Villain, thy own hands yields thy death's instrument.
And Richard proceeds to seize a weapon from the murderer and kills him with it. He then kills another murderer. So Richard, this man that we have seen put upon this entire play, is now, first of all, he's being offered food. And he says, no, you taste it first. And of course the guy won't, and it's pretty clear it's poisoned. And then in come the murderers, and what does Richard do? This whole play, we've seen him give up, lay down, abdicate the throne, this whole thing. He seizes a weapon from the murderer and kills him with it. He then kills another murderer, and he proceeds to fight back. He fights 4 men to save his life. Finally, they, of course, do kill him. But, you know, this is an odd moment in this play that I thought was really interesting, where you see this, it's almost like this animal that's backed into a corner, and kind of what we talked about last night. What kind of king would Richard have been had England, this sceptered isle, been put at risk, had it been invaded, as opposed to Richard going to Ireland to create a foreign war to fill the coffers? What kind of king would he have proven to be had England itself been invaded? Because if this is any indication, Richard, when backed into a corner, fights like the lion his wife wanted him to be. But it takes him being betrayed, trodden upon, and forced into a corner before he will defend himself, essentially. Thoughts from the group?
I just...
Sorry,
go ahead,
sorry.
Hailey.
I was going to say, it's a clear fight or flight response, at least from what we can see, you know. And I think also what we were talking about last night is that I think also this man cares so much about honor and his image and his legacy. And we talked about how honestly dishonorable it is to die by poison, because I mean it's not a pleasant way to go. And a lot of people think of, or at least during this time, thought of poison as the cowardly way to kill a man. And it was very sneaky and deceptive. I think that plays into it as well, as why he said, no, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die fighting.
And talking about Richard's vanity, I just think it's so funny how in his mind at this point, everyone's betrayed him. And it even gets to where his royal food tester is betraying him. Like, I just think that just shows how hurt he is inside with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he's literally lost everything. At this point, he has nothing to lose further. So, you know, it is a fight or flight. It's sort of the last effort, the last ditch effort he has. We've got one more scene, guys. So thanks for sticking with us. We've got vengeance and propriety here. This is the scene, the very last moments of the play, in fact, in which King Henry IV is now presented with some traitors, some people he pardons, some people have been executed, and he's sort of meting out justice, essentially. Some people need to be executed, some people might need to be pardoned or at least exiled to a comfortable monastery, etc., etc. But he is then presented by Exton, this murderer, essentially. Exton comes in with his serving men and the coffin bearing the body of Richard II, and he presents it proudly to King Henry, thinking, of course, I'll get some huge reward. And instead, this is what King Henry has to say to Exton. So this will be Erin as King Henry IV, and this will be Nick reading Exton. So when you're ready, guys, take it away.
Exton, I thank thee not, for thou hast brought a deed of slander with thy fatal hand upon my head and all this famous land.
From your own mouth, my lord, did I this deed.
They love not poison that do poison need, nor do I thee. Though I did wish him dead, I hate the murderer, love him murdered. The guilt of conscience take thou for thy labor, but neither my good word nor princely favor. With Cain, go wander through shades of night, and never show thy head by day nor light. Lords, I protest my soul is full of woe, that blood should sprinkle me to make me grow. Come, mourn with me for what I do lament, and put on sullen black incontinent. I'll make a voyage to the Holy Land to wash this blood off from my guilty hand. March sadly after, grace my mornings here in weeping after this untimely bier.
Very nice, very, very nice read, you guys. Thank you very much. So yeah, this is a moment in which you have Henry is presented with the death of a king, his predecessor, who has been murdered. And is he pleased? No. Is it a bad precedent to set to murder a king? Absolutely, especially in Henry's mind. Furthermore, I think it's very interesting because Exton says, from your own mouth, my lord, did I this deed. There's some conjecture because earlier we sort of skipped over the scene where Henry never does give that order, but Exton sort of infers it and then goes and does this murder. But nonetheless, Henry has done everything in his power to take the throne away from Richard. So it's this idea that, well, thus far and no farther. You know, it's also this idea of, well, you can't talk to my, you know, you can't talk to my children like that. Only I can talk to my children like that. It's that old joke, you know, you can't kill a king. Only I can kill a king. And so Exton dares to do this thing, and it upsets the laws of propriety, but it also, I think, speaks to the idea that even now with Henry, it's this, Shakespeare often does this. He gives you in the last moments of these history plays, he gives you a sort of a slight view of what the forthcoming royal's reign will be. right? And in this instance, we've had Henry pardoning someone, pardoning O'Merrill, right, in the earlier scene, but now we have him saying to someone who has done something that has been beneficial to him in some ways, but he's punishing him for it. It's interesting. It's similar. Richard III has a very similar instance with his murderer who murders the two princes. He rewards him, but in that instance, of course, that murderer flees and feels terrible about it, and for all we know, hides himself away. Right? It's terrible. But in this instance, Henry does not want to reward the person who tries to do him good. And then again, wants to make this voyage to the Holy Land, wash the blood from his guilty hand. Very Pontius Pilate, right? Very much of a Pontius Pilate, sort of, in some ways a hypocritical thing, because he did depose Richard. He sent him to Pomfret. I mean, there wasn't a good end coming for Richard. So to do then this thing at the end of, oh, I didn't want this, is, I don't know if hypocritical might be too strong of a word, but it's a very interesting tack to take at the very end of this play. What do you guys, anyone have any thoughts on that specifically? In fact, let's do this. Let's open it up let's bring everyone back. If everyone's still with us, if you all want to start your videos up, when we have a few minutes. I know we've run a little bit long, but we kind of joked last night that this is some of the only chance that we actors get together and play and have fun doing theater. So thank you for indulging us and staying with us. But Erin, I think you were going to say something about this scene.
Well, it's just, if you kind of look at it from the actor's point of view, and if you raising the stakes and playing the opposites, let's say that Exton comes in and he's like, I did it, here you go. I mean, where does the scene go? What room is there for Henry to grow if he's like, yeah, all right, party in his grave?
Right.
So I think is just stylistically, it is the button to the end of the play. If he had reacted in any other way, I think, to your point, it wouldn't have set the next play within the history cycle in motion.
Sure.
I think it's also kind of like showing, like tipping King Henry's hand to his privilege, in the sense that, like, he started this war because of stuff, and like all he wanted to do was take the stuff of Richard, because Richard took his stuff, so he took his crown, and it was never about him. It was never about him as a man. And then like the logical step that Exton took of killing the previous king so that he couldn't break out of prison and raise an army and depose him. Well, like King Henry acts as though he had never even thought of it. Like this was never about because it seems like that Richard is the only person that King Henry views as an equal. Everyone else is a pawn that he can play in this stuff to get it, like this big play to get his money back. Like, he can start a war, he can kill nobles, but as long as he gets the stuff that he feels he is owed, it's okay. But as soon as you kill my cousin, that's a bridge too far. It's a weird double standard, I think.
Yeah. There does feel like there's this club almost that you really want to be in this play. Because if you're not, bad things are going to happen. Yes, Hailey, what were you going to say?
Well, I was also going to say that I think that Henry is very keen on honors. I mean, this whole family is. Many people during this time were obsessed with honor. But he became king in probably the most honorable way that you can, besides just inheriting it. Because if you want to become king, the easy, quick way is just kill the king in charge and take over. But he got support of the commoners, he got support of lords, and then he had the current king hand his crown to him. And so I think that for him to come in for this to all of this work that he's put in and making sure that everything was done the honorable way, or as honorable as it can be, for him to have this blood on his hands. And so for someone to kill the past king in his name, yeah, I mean, I think that shows why he's going to the Holy Land, why he feels that he needs to wash his hands of that, because that's not how he wants to rule.
Right, but it's too late in some ways, right? I mean, the deed's been done, and now he's sort of tainted with this. And it was also, I feel like, again, it's this inevitable end to his actions. I mean, it's almost one of those things where colloquially, I'd want to shake him by the shoulders and say, "What did you expect?" You know, I mean, this is what you've been driving towards. You know, this is the point A leads to B, leads to C, leads to Z, where King Richard is dead. You know, I mean, that's what the ultimate end would be.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not the way he wanted to do things, but I think, yeah, it's the inevitable end to the way that this whole, you know, usurping a throne sort of typically goes, especially in the Middle Ages. But the play as a whole, we probably should round it out and end the evening, but I do really want to hear any thoughts or just a play in general or on your favorite scenes. We've kind of taken a walk through this whole piece now, so I hope at the very least all of you that joined us tonight are a lot more familiar with this wonderful, beautifully written play. So many famous lines, so many famous speeches, and so much to think about, especially as has been brought up in light of our political climate these days. Again, it is some things never change, and it's a play, as Erin pointed out, in 1601 and in 2020, and probably in another 400 years there'll be some other thing that's going to be very resembling of this subject matter. So, final thoughts, parting shots from the crowd.
We want to thank you for the opportunity. I know that with this COVID, it's been trying. We've had season tickets at the Majestic here in San Antonio for 7 years, and it's now 10 plays that they've canceled. They said the earliest one we can have is in June. So I know how tough it must be for those who have pursued a career in this industry. But thank you for the opportunity to see this.
Right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. This was a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful exercise. I know the actors appreciate the opportunity to stretch their legs. I do want to say, if you do feel like there is, I know that, of course, your support dollars are being pulled in a lot of different directions now, but Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park is a nonprofit, and we are dependent upon the kindness of friends to make ourselves viable and to keep the lights on. I'm going to post a link in chat. That's our okshakes.org donate page. Literally $5 to $50 to whatever you can give, if you can give anything. I know that budgets are tight and times are hard, so please know that I completely sympathize. But if you're able to give, we would surely appreciate it. We've just entered into our annual campaign now, and of course we had to cancel our entire 2020 season following our February show, and it looks like we're probably not going to be able to come back until April of next year. April or May of next year is our hope. So at any rate, I leave you with that. I've done my duty as the managing director here, but I also, again, thank you so much to our actors, to our dramaturgs. Here, I'll give my little round of applause one more time here. To all of our audience, this was just a great deal of fun. We had a great turnout. I just can't believe it. This is our first time we've ever done this. We are doing 2 more of these. The next up will be Coriolanus, and that'll be in December 3rd. And remind me, Erin, Erin Sloan is going to be doing Henry VIII in January, and we picked a date, and it's not coming to my mind right away.
29th.
29th.
January 29th.
January 29th, and Erin is going to be directing that one, Henry VIII. So we've got Coriolanus in December and Henry VIII in January. So please join us for those, and look on our website, look for more opportunities and fun things to come. Thank you all so much, and stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyler and everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Good night, all. Good night.
See everyone.